tell you just a little bit about her before she speaks. I think that, what? Better? Okay. Thank you. Okay. So my mom has been her whole life a very devoted daughter, loving wife, amazing mother and grandmother. And my sister Ilana, the aunt of Arya Jerry Rosenfeld, is here today. And my sister Gila, 2 of her 3 boys are here today to be here, as well as my husband and brother-in-law. My mother is also incredibly beautiful on the inside and out, stylish, brilliant, a fabulous cook, and an excellent bridge player, very accomplished. She's an Emerald Light Master. She plays sometimes next door. Little background about my dad, my husband. My father was also born in Poland, in Krakow, and he survived concentration camp, so that from the time that we were very young, we knew some of his story because my sister Gila was named for his mother, I was named for his sister, Ilana was named for another sister, cousin in Israel was named for his father. He had numbers on his arm, so we had some idea of what he had been through. And he didn't talk about it a lot, but he would answer questions. Whereas my mother survived with her entire family intact, and all we knew was that she was hidden. And we actually thought that she had a very good childhood, that she was incredibly privileged compared to some of the other Wiener that we knew who had been in Auschwitz or Mauthausen or whatever. And we had literally no idea the type of conditions that she lived through. We knew that she had been hidden by righteous Gentiles. We knew their names, and that was about it. She really didn't talk about it, and she did not want us to ever have anything that would ruin our own childhood. She wanted us to have the childhood that she didn't have. And so that she just really didn't tell us anything, and we thought that she was very, very lucky to be saved, and she was. But you'll hear a little bit more about her story. You'll understand that her childhood was not really a childhood. It's amazing how brilliant and accomplished she is. Her education was interrupted when she was still in elementary school, and her life, of course, was never the same. It's a privilege to be in a community like this that has survivors and that honors the survivors. And as a person who grew up surrounded by so many, all our relatives were survivors and family friends, I would say that I would never approach a survivor and ask them directly about their experiences during the war. But there are so few survivors left, and every year fewer and fewer. So given the opportunity, I do try to ask the survivors that I meet about their childhood and about what their life was like before the war, because it really is a vanished world, and it's vanishing even more before our eyes. So it really is a privilege when you do get to speak with a survivor to find out a little bit about what their lives were like before. I want to thank you for inviting my mom to speak today. It's a very special community that you have here. And before she speaks, I just want to say that some of the things that I have learned from listening to her, one of the most important things is resilience. That no matter what bad thing happens to anybody, no matter how terrible it is, it's possible to live a very good life, a life of meaning, a life of hope, to create goodness and to appreciate what is still good. The importance of family, the importance of education, both Jewish and secular, to treasure Judaism, to treasure Israel, and also the imperative to remember the 6 million, to remember the survivors, and to learn, to Sahor. So my mother, Sarah Lee.
Good evening. I want to thank Yom HaShoah for inviting me to come here tonight and speak to you. When she asked me, I hesitated a minute because it brings back horrible memories that I endured as a child. But I also felt that it is my obligation to bear witness as a representative of the children who will never smile, who will never stand beneath the wedding canopy, and in the name of the parents whose children were torn from their arms, and for the grandmothers and grandfathers whose screams were never heard. The Nazis did not want their victims to be remembered. They were very devious in hiding their atrocities so that the world would not learn about them. We were concerned that should the final solution be 100% successful, that nobody would be left to bear witness. Therefore, when all was lost, families, friends, there seemed to be nothing left to live for, we still had one strong reason to strive for survival so that we might live to tell the world the true story and that the perpetrator should not be able to falsify it. We who survived must tell the world what really happened. You have probably heard from others who survived concentration camps. Now I will tell you a very unique and miraculous story of one very lucky family, my family. Before the war, my parents, my 3 sisters, and I lived a very comfortable life in a small town in Poland called Nowe Korczyn. Until the Nazis invaded, I had a very happy childhood. We had a lot of Jewish and non-Jewish friends. My parents were very hard-working people. My father had a soda factory, not exactly like Coca-Cola, but a soda factory. And he also had a shoe store and a clothing store. He was a very successful businessman. At age 5, we started to go to Hebrew school, and at age 7, public school, which was mandatory. And I enjoyed every bit. We were very, very busy. We had no toys, but we had a good life. In 1939, when the Germans invaded Poland, persecution against Jews started immediately and increased steadily. The Jews were evacuated from the big cities, and many lost their homes, and many were killed. When the Germans invaded our town, they burned the synagogue and started to kill people for no reason at all. My father's business was taken over by a German commissar, but we were allowed to continue to live in our house. In 1942, we first heard about Aussiedlungs, so-called evacuations of Jews, and we were afraid that the same thing would happen in our town. At this point, a Polish Catholic man, Józef Matsugowski, told my father that he would help us if necessary. There were evacuations before, and the Nazis had everyone convinced that people went to labor camps. My parents had 4 little girls, and they wondered what happened to the little children. The cruel answer of mass murder and total extermination of all children occurred to no one. This was the 20th century, and the Germans were supposed to be civilized people. The German commissar, who was taking over and learning our business, confided to my father how much he worried about being sent to the Russian front. This encouraged my father to ask him, what happens to the children when is an Aussiedlung? He answered without hesitation in a matter-of-fact way, they will be sent to Himmelschule, meaning a school in heaven. Now our parents knew that even if they would be taken to work camp, their children would perish. They decided they would hide when the Aussiedlung came. In November 1942, early in the morning at 6 o'clock, we heard over the loudspeakers, Alle Juden heraus zum Bahnhof, all Jews out to the town square. We heard it over and over again. 4,000 Jews emerged from their homes, leaving everything behind. The horror began. I remember an SS officer shouting at one woman, raise your hands. She was holding her baby. Throw it away, he shouted. But she did not, and both of them were shot to death. As you can imagine, this memory has stayed with me my whole life. Most of the Jews were sent away, but about 150 were left, including my family. We stayed in a ghetto for a few months. What I remember most vividly about the time is one instance when an SS guard came in the middle of the night and told my father to get dressed and go outside. They tied him to a tree and we heard 2 shots. The SS guard came back to the house and said, we killed your father, and who is next? And started pointing at my mother and then to us. At this point, my older sister Zahava, Zichrona Livracha, stood up and said, if you kill my father, kill me too. At this point, the lieutenant said that he has a daughter the same age and that she would have never done this for him. Then he told us that it had been a joke and my father came back to us. My brave sister Zahava passed away before she was able to tell her stories to her grandchildren. And then there were rumors that they were going to liquidate the Jewish ghetto. My father started to make arrangements for the family to go into hiding. For his mother and sister to one Polish family, my older sister Rita to a different family. For the rest of us, he had made plans for us to hide in the cellar of the Polish couple that had offered to help Józef and Stefan Matsugowski. He thought that by having us in different places, that at least somebody would survive. When my father found out that it was likely the ghetto was going to be liquidated, the next few days he got us up in the middle of the night and we went to the Matsugowski's house. As soon as we got there, the kids were rushed to the barn and we hid in the haystack. The adults prepared the cellar as best as they could and we went into the bunker. The entire space was only about 12 feet by 13 and only 3 feet deep. It was so shallow that not even the smallest child could stand up straight. It was close to the river and they couldn't make it any deeper, so the water would start to come in. We thought that we would be there only for a few days, but we ended up staying there for 2.5 years. We started out with 3 adults and 4 children, and we were already packed like sardines. But when my father heard that there was a teenage boy and another Jewish man stranded in the woods, he encouraged Joseph to hide them with us. So we ended up 9 people in a small space. We couldn't stand up. The kids learned to cry soundlessly, and we only hoped that we wouldn't starve. The most we got each day was a slice of bread and some water. My father never finished his piece of bread, leaving it for the children, and we children left it for my mother, who was not in the best of health. We heard children playing outside, but we didn't understand why we couldn't play too. My father reassured us that it would be over soon and we would be free. Of course, then we had no idea how lucky we were. My grandmother and my aunt were murdered by the Poles shortly after they went into hiding, and my oldest sister Rita was kicked out of her hiding place and then ended up in the ghetto. When she came back to the ghetto, the Germans tortured her. They wanted to know where we are. And she said if she knew where we were, then she wouldn't have come back there. When the ghetto was liquidated, Rita was sent to the line of the young and weak who were destined to be killed. But at that last minute, she was saved by her future husband, who pulled her up by her arms onto the track with the people who were chosen to work in camp. In the bunker, there were times that we thought that the Nazis were going to find us. We begged the Matsugorskis to give us poison so that we might die in dignity and not be killed by the SS. Matsugorskis refused. When it seemed that things couldn't possibly get worse, the cruelest blow of all came. The front was near, and the Nazis chose the Matsugorskis' home as their headquarters, because it was where it was located. The Matsugorskis were told to leave. They begged to stay, but were not allowed. For days there was no food in the bunker. The Matsugorskis decided to come back and offer to work as servants in the new German headquarters. The Germans finally agreed to let them stay on as workers, and they were able to continue bringing us food so that we could live. In the bunker, we heard the voices of the German reporting to their superiors in Berlin, calling the town Judenfrei, free of Jews. Sometimes earlier, when the Matsugorskis still lived in their house, we heard the neighbors and friends telling them how happy they were that there were no more Jews in their town except for one family, the Rapchas, my family, who might still be around. But no one knew where they were hidden, and we had them saying that. When the war ended in 1945, the Matsugorskis took us next town out of fear that the neighbors learned that they saved Jews. They might be harmed. Our first steps outside the bunker were wobbly. We couldn't walk because for 2.5 years we could, not even stand up. A Russian soldier thought my father was drunk and had gotten his children drunk. He threatened to kill my father over this. We had a lot of explaining to do. When we went back to our town and found that our house has been bombed, the new Polish authority assigned us a room from another Jewish family. We had been there only a few days when someone threw a grenade into the room. Fortunately, we escaped without harm. This let us know that even after the war, it was dangerous for Jews to live in Poland, especially in small towns. We left our town quickly for the big city lodge, hoping to find more Jewish people. In the lodge, we met survivors from concentration camps. They told us that my sister Rita, my older sister, had died of typhoid in camp. 1 month later, Rita appeared. She had survived Bergen-Belsen and the concentration camp. Even our mother did not recognize her. She has lost all of her weight and her hair was shaven off. Actually, my parents would shiver after her. Soon after, we went to Munich to the DP camp. Even so, I was still a young girl in high school. I began to work, which would become the Israeli consulate. I worked half a day and I studied for another half a day. Eventually, after staying there for about 5 years, we were able to come to the United States. We found a new home, a haven. I wanted to forget the many years of suffering that I had experienced as a young child. I never wanted to talk about the past. Still, my family and I remembered the Matsugorski and what they risked in order to save our lives. Finally, in 1982, when the Cold War was over, my sister Zahava, blessed memory, started to search and was able to find our survivors. She made arrangements for the Matsugorskis to come to the United States and to receive the appreciation that they deserve. You can only imagine the emotional scene at Kennedy Airport when my sisters and I were united with the Matsugorskis, now elderly and somewhat frail. The reunion was made more dramatic by our group suddenly being surrounded by reporters. The Matsugorskis were to be honored at a special dinner by a Jewish organization which had issued a press release. And suddenly I found my voice and was able to tell the stories of what had happened during the war. I wanted these reporters to tell everybody about the Matsugorskis and their heroism, as well to tell about the 6 million Jews who were not lucky enough to have somebody save them. My own children had never heard the specific about the horrible years of the war, and now they were hearing them from the first time on Good Morning America or reading about them in the New York newspapers. My very good friend saw the story on the 6 o'clock news and couldn't believe that they didn't know about this part of my past. Still, the most, so much has been said in justified anger about the perpetrators of the Holocaust. Now is the time to speak about the good people like the Matsugorskis. They were the just among the nations of the world who saved Jews at mortal danger to themselves and their family. Legend has it that the world exists because of the very few righteous people, the 36 just people, the Lamed Vodniks. No matter the religion, these humble, few, truly righteous people are the pillars on which this world stands. We hope that someday the influence will be so contagious that goodness will become the nature of all mankind. I hope and pray that today I did my part, however small, in remembering the agony and heroism of those not fortunate to survive the Holocaust. May we never forget them. Thank you. I'm very grateful to the United States for letting us come in here, and we found a new heaven. Thank you very much. It was wonderful. And I do try to do the best I can, and I don't take life for granted. I just live every day and I'm grateful that I'm alive, and I'm very, very lucky. I have a wonderful family. I have 3 beautiful daughters, very accomplished, and I have 8 the most wonderful grandchildren. 2 of them I didn't even know they're coming. They're studying in New York, but they heard I'm going to speak, so they rent a car or whatever. They got the car and they came out. And that's Joshi and Zaki.
Sarah will be able to, after the program, if anyone would like to speak with her personally or ask questions, we'll do so after the event. Yeah, afterwards. Thank you. At this point, I'd like to call upon Dr. Safer again to lead us in the Kalamali Rock meeting.
El Malera Sami